Earlier this week, I was working with one of my existing clients, a guy called Paul, and he found Knack back in 2012 and has built a really massive application. And we were trying to make some updates, and he was filtering this table using the standard Add Filters button. But he was also using this purple menu along the top, and I couldn't quite understand how he was using a standard Knack menu for filtering. But when he showed me, I'm like, why didn't I ever think of this? It was one of those every day is a school day situations. So let me show you in this video how you can set up a menu for filtering. So jumping back into my classic Clips application, the setup I have here is I have a status column which has approved, pending and declined as the three options. And I have the usual add filters button here, which is standard on Knack. And I can then therefore change the status and say, show me those that are only pending rather than approved or declined. And that will filter this list in place. And it obviously then adds the filter link, which I can click on. And if I wanted to, obviously I can change it to approved and submit that, and that would change to my approved records. But I can also add an additional level of filtering. So if I only wanted to show records that were over £600, I can click back on this and add another level and say where the value is higher than 600, and that will just give me two records. So this is really good for being able to do sort of drill down filtering and add your own conditions. But often users find it much easier to have the filter options as buttons. So if I go into the builder, on my page, I have my table. And if I scroll down, I have various filter options. Obviously, the first one is do not allow records to be filtered. But the one we're on here is allow users to add custom filters showing any fields that are on the view, which is kind of typical. I don't tend to use all the fields in a table. But the other one is a user filter. Now, a user filter is a really nice way of using it for a sort of user interface, because now I've got a button here that says pending, one for approved and one for declined. And to set these up, all I've done is said if the status field is pending, mark a button called pending, which gives me this button here. And then I've repeated it for link 2. So link 2 is if it's approved, the button says approved, and the last one, if the status is declined, then the button says declined. So if I was to save that, come back to my app and do a refresh, you can now see I have this custom buttons. Now Knack always defaults to the left hand side, so it's set on pending. So I can click on approved and then click on declined. And this is a really easy way for users without having to use the filter button. But the only downside to this is I can't do any additional filtering. So whereas before I filtered these to approved and I had 3 records, if I wanted to show those that were greater than £600, there is no way of me adding another level of filtering. So going back into the builder, I'm just going to go back into settings and switch that back to allow users to add their own filters. So now I'm back to where I was with my 9 records and my usual standard filters option. So these buttons at the top are just menu buttons, but if I click on them, I can filter these down to pending, approved, or declined. And you see by clicking on them, it's setting the filter to declined. I click on approved, so marks that to approved, and then this sets it to pending. So this is just the standard filtering. So from here, if I wanted to show records that were above a certain value, so if I go back to my approved example, I could now add another filter to here, just like normal, and say where the value is higher than 600, and that will just give me my additional 2 records. So this is actually really straightforward. If I remove the filters, so I've got all my records, what I want to do is first of all just define what the filter looks like. So I'm going to say where the status is pending. So these are my pending records, and all that information is stored in the URL. So I'm just going to copy that, and I'm going to replicate this menu buttons for you. So if I go into the builder, and on my page, I'm going to add a view, and it's a menu view, and I'm going to add a link to a URL. So I'm going to call the link pending, and I'm going to paste the URL in. Obviously, I can come down here and then change the color, but I'm just going to leave it green for this example. So I now have my menu here. I'm going to move it up to the top, and I've got a button that says green, says pending, sorry. So if I come back and do a refresh, So now when I'm back in my live app, if I click on this button, it will redirect me to this URL and filter the page and just show those records that are pending. So all you need to do is rinse and repeat on the other ones. So if I add a filter here and just say where the status is approved, that's going to filter my records and give me a new URL. So I'm going to copy that. I'm just going to remove my filters, go back to the builder, link to a URL, call this approved, paste in my URL. Once again, I could obviously override the colors, but I'm just going to stay with green. Back to the live app, do a refresh. So I've got my pending link and now I've got my approved link. So this has filtered these to approved. Obviously, what Paul has done here is added buttons for every one of his categories in purple. So you then have the ability to filter these, but also click on the add filters button and add an additional level of filtering. I hope you found this video of some benefit. If you did, please do give it a thumbs up. If you're curious how I added the icon here for filters and also the shadow box, check out my next video and I'll see you there.